Hello everyone. This is the first video where I get to meet you and share stories about the supernatural, unexplained events that happen in everyday life. All based on true occurrences. However, to make the stories more engaging and suspenseful, I may add some thrilling details to enhance the experience. Please support me by subscribing to the channel. Thank you. Today I have a story to share with you. This is a real experience, recounted by someone who lived through it. It doesn't involve terrifying ghosts or gruesome apparitions, but it carries an unsettling feeling, one that lingers in the back of your mind, making you question what is real and what is not. Imagine this. It's a peaceful morning. You're lying in bed, caught between sleep and wakefulness, enjoying those last few moments of rest. And then, just beside you, you hear a soft, sweet voice whisper, "Mommy?" You open your eyes. There's no one there. What would you think? A dream? A trick of the mind? Or, is there someone, right there with you? This story begins with a simple whisper, two little words. But those words opened the door to something strange, something inexplicable, something that, to this day, remains a mystery. My husband and I lived in a small house in the suburbs. We didn't have children, though we had always wished for one. Life was quiet, ordinary. Nothing unusual ever happened, until that morning. I was lying in bed, barely awake, basking in the warmth of the sheets when I heard it. "Mommy?" The voice was soft, innocent, and incredibly real. I wasn't scared. If anything, it felt oddly comforting, as if a child was truly there, calling out to me. But when I opened my eyes, the room was empty. Silence surrounded me, except for the faint sound of my own heartbeat, which had suddenly picked up pace. A strange feeling settled over me, not fear. Not yet, but something unfamiliar. Something I couldn't quite understand. I didn't tell my husband. I convinced myself it must have been a dream, a lingering echo of my subconscious. But then, the strange occurrences began. One afternoon, while cooking in the kitchen, I felt someone watching me. I turned around. No one was there. Yet the feeling persisted, an invisible presence lingering just at the edge of my senses. Another evening, while I was reading in the living room, I heard it again, a faint giggle, childlike and distant. I froze, my fingers gripping the pages of my book. I strained to listen, but the sound was gone. The house was still, too still. That was the first time I felt something was truly wrong. Then came my husband's experience. He's not the type to get scared easily. But one night, while rummaging through the study, searching for a pack of cigarettes he had hidden away, he heard it. "What are you doing?" A small, curious voice, a child's voice. He turned abruptly, his breath catching in his throat. The room was empty. This time, there was no denying it. He ran out of the study, pale as a sheet. When he told me what had happened, I could see the fear in his eyes. My husband, the rational one, the skeptic, was genuinely shaken. But I felt something different. I wasn't afraid like he was. I felt something deeper, something inexplicable, a familiarity. As if I knew this child. As if I had met them before, somewhere. After that, the dreams started. I dreamed of a little girl in a white dress, standing in the corner of my bedroom, her eyes filled with sadness. Every time I tried to approach her, she would fade into a soft mist, disappearing before I could reach her. One night, while in the bathroom, I caught a glimpse of a small shadow dart past the door. My breath hitched. The door was shut, locked. There was no way anyone could have been there. And then, One morning, I woke up to a strange sensation. A light touch against my cheek, like the brush of tiny fingers. I opened my eyes, and for the briefest moment, I saw her, a little girl standing at the foot of my bed. But as soon as I blinked, she was gone. I don't know who she was. I don't know why she called me Mommy, or why she vanished as mysteriously as she appeared. But deep inside, I felt something I couldn't explain. A loss, a hollow space in my heart, as if I had lost something precious but could never remember what it was. And to this day, in the quietest of mornings, when the sunlight creeps through the curtains and the world is still asleep, I sometimes hear it again, right beside my ear. Mommy? Sometimes, fear doesn't come from a monstrous apparition or a terrifying figure in the dark. It isn't about shadows moving in the night or eerie whispers in an empty room. Sometimes, fear is something much simpler. Something that feels real and unreal at the same time. Something you can't see, but you know is there. And maybe, the scariest things in this world are the ones we will never understand. Now, let's move on to the second story. This one takes us to a house on a remote island, an island of breathtaking beauty. Surrounded by endless forests and fresh ocean air. But beneath this picturesque scenery lies a mystery. One that I experienced firsthand. A mystery that still sends chills down my spine whenever I think about it. Orcas Island, part of the San Juan Archipelago in Washington, is a place of wonder. Towering ancient trees stretch toward the sky. The air is crisp with the scent of damp earth and pine. And the world here feels untouched by time. Nestled deep within this wilderness was a grand old estate, hidden among 80 acres of forest. That was where I stayed with my family and friends during a trip in 1990. The house wasn't some decrepit, abandoned mansion. On the contrary, it was well maintained, elegant, and filled with antique furniture. But from the moment I stepped inside, I felt something, a vague unease. An unshakable sense that I wasn't alone, even when I knew no one else was around. It was a hot August afternoon. My friends and family had all gone out to play tennis, leaving me alone in the house. I welcomed the peace and quiet, enjoying the warm breeze on the porch. But soon, the heat became oppressive, the air thick and stifling. Deciding to cool off, I stepped inside, and on a whim, I started exploring the house. I wandered through the rooms, admiring the intricate architecture and the vintage decor. The walls were adorned with old portraits, the warm glow of antique lamps casting flickering shadows, and tall bookshelves lined the study, filled with leather-bound tomes. The house was undeniably beautiful. Yet there was something about it, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. It felt as if unseen eyes were watching me, lurking just beyond my field of vision. Eventually, I made my way up to the attic. The attic had an old, musty scent, the air heavy with the smell of aged wood. Sunlight streamed through a small window, illuminating dust motes floating in the still air. My eyes were drawn to something in the corner, a large mirror with an ornately carved wooden frame. It was stunning, almost mesmerizing, yet there was an unsettling quality to it. Unable to resist my curiosity, I stepped closer and looked into the glass. And in that moment, everything changed. A sound, faint at first, began to rise around me. At first, I thought it was just the wind slipping through cracks in the wood. But no, these were voices. Many voices. They overlapped, blending together in a frantic, desperate cacophony. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I felt their urgency, their sorrow, their desperation. There were so many of them, all speaking at once, all pleading to be heard. My heart pounded. I wanted to move, to turn away, but my feet wouldn't obey. The voices grew louder, more frantic, pressing in from every direction. And then, among them, one voice stood out, clear, whispering, just beside my ear. "Can you see me?" That was it. That was all I could take. I screamed, spun around, and ran. I bolted down the stairs, my pulse hammering in my ears, leaving the mirror and its voices behind. When my family and friends returned, I wasted no time in asking the homeowner's son if the house was haunted. He studied me for a moment, then gave a small, knowing smile. "I suppose you've met our resident ghost." He then told me a story that sent a new wave of unease through me. Years ago, a woman had taken her own life in that house. She had sealed a rag into the exhaust pipe of her car, started the engine, and succumbed to carbon monoxide poisoning in the garage. A quiet, lonely death, and though she had left this world, it seemed she had never left the house. I don't know if the voices I heard belonged to her. I don't know if she was reaching out for help or simply lingering in the only place she had ever known. But one thing is certain, I never stepped foot in that attic again. We often think of haunted houses as abandoned, crumbling ruins, the kind we see in horror movies. But sometimes, the most beautiful places hold the darkest secrets. Not all strange occurrences come with an explanation. Sometimes, we don't need to know who, why, or how. We only need to know that there are things in this world we cannot see, but we can feel them. And perhaps, that is the most terrifying thing of all. The haunting of the old neighborhood. I was never one to believe in ghosts or the supernatural. At least, that's what I used to think. Growing up in a quiet neighborhood in Iowa, I always believed that ghost stories were just figments of overactive imaginations. But then, there are experiences that defy explanation, moments that make even the most skeptical person hesitate. That's why I decided to return to the place I once called home, accompanied by Dinishka, to prove to her that fear is nothing more than a trick of the mind. I thought I knew this neighborhood well, the streets, the houses, and the mysteries that had long gone unanswered. But I was wrong. That night, we didn't just revisit the past. We encountered something that did not belong to this world. It was the weekend I decided to finally honor a promise I had made long ago. I had told Dinishka, over countless cups of coffee in San Francisco, that one day, I would take her to visit the haunted neighborhood where I grew up. The eerie memories of my childhood home in Iowa had always lingered in my mind. And though I had put off the visit for years, the time had finally come. I can't recall the exact year. It was probably around 1987, but I do remember the air was thick with the scent of autumn when we made the drive. We had just arrived at my mother's house, a quaint but aging structure on a hill in a quiet suburban town. And after a quick catch-up with her, I decided it was time to show Dinishka the one place I had promised her we would visit. We started the climb up the hill from my mom's house, the steep incline making it harder to breathe as we trudged upward. The air grew cooler as the shadows stretched longer. It had been a while since I'd been in this part of town. And as we crested the hill, I was struck by how much things had changed. The neighborhood, once vibrant and full of life, seemed to be falling apart, almost forgotten by time itself. We crossed the street and entered a yard that had once been a playground for my childhood memories. The path was harder to follow now. The ground soft and uneven beneath my boots. It felt like the land itself had shifted. Like the earth was trying to tell us something. There was a strange pull in the air, a palpable heaviness that seemed to grow with every step we took. "Is it different here?" Dinishka asked, her voice quiet but filled with curiosity. "Everything's different, but it's still the same," I replied, feeling a chill creep up my spine. I hadn't realized how much I had forgotten, or how much I had buried in the recesses of my mind. The walk took us further into the neighborhood, past the old houses, many of which were now abandoned or falling apart. The further we went, the darker it became. It was almost as though the shadows were closing in on us, suffocating the air. We reached the back of a large plot of land, where a small bridge crossed over a creek that ran sluggishly through the area. The creek seemed to whisper in the darkness, though it was hard to tell if it was the sound of water or something else. We crossed the bridge, moving deeper into the woods behind the houses. The air felt thick with an unnatural energy as we walked through a narrow path, our footsteps muffled by the dense carpet of fallen leaves. We finally emerged onto a road, the one that led north from my mom's house, and began to walk west, passing the long forgotten homes. It was then that I saw it. Just ahead, beyond the curve in the road, stood the totem pole. The totem pole stood in the distance, an unnatural presence against the backdrop of the darkened street. But something was wrong with it. It wasn't standing straight like it had when I was a child. Instead, it curved, as if melting into the ground, twisted into a grotesque arch that reminded me of a giant serpent or the hollowed-out remains of some unspeakable creature. As we approached, I felt a deep unease settle into my stomach. The pole, once a simple wooden carving, had been altered, defiled, over the years. The intricate details of old faces had been replaced by something far more disturbing. A massive ear nearly a meter long. A grotesquely stretched face that looked like the king from a deck of playing cards. A brain grotesquely oversized compared to any humans, and mushrooms that seemed to pulse as if alive. The entire thing looked like a fever dream, the kind of nightmare conjured by a mind unraveling into madness. Dinishka reached out hesitantly, her fingers barely grazing the surface. "It's cold," she whispered, pulling her hand back immediately. "Like porcelain, or fiberglass?" I nodded. "They must have rebuilt it, but why like this?" There was no answer, only the eerie silence of the empty neighborhood. A wind swept through the street, rustling the leaves, but it felt unnatural, as if something was breathing against the back of my neck. "We should keep moving," I muttered, guiding Dinishka past the totem. The feeling of being watched had crept over me, and the further we walked, the more it intensified. Soon, we arrived at the church parking lot. It was a place of solace when I was younger, but tonight, under the star-strewn sky, it felt wrong. We lay down in the parking lot, staring up at the infinite darkness above us. It should have been peaceful, but instead, a low, almost imperceptible noise reached my ears. Laughter. Not loud, not joyous, just the soft sound of giggling. Scattered voices whispering as if sharing some dark joke only they understood. Dinishka stiffened beside me. "Do you hear that?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, but I think it's coming from." Before I could finish my sentence, an oppressive sensation fell over us. It wasn't just darkness. It was something worse. It was a void, an emptiness so complete it felt like it was reaching into my chest, trying to dig into the marrow of my bones. Instinctively, we scrambled to our feet. Back to back, the laughter stopped, replaced by an awful, suffocating silence. Even the crickets had ceased their song. Then, a growl. Not exactly a sound. More like a presence vibrating through the air, rumbled around us. "Run," I said, and we did. We bolted across the lot, heading toward the Robinsons' backyard, a dense, tangled mess of a garden that connected to the field leading back home. But the thing, whatever it was already moving. I couldn't see it, but I felt it, shifting through the shadows, cutting off our escape routes before we could even reach them. Heart pounding, I grabbed Dinishka's wrist and gestured toward another route, one that cut through the Koki's front yard. It was a risk, but I had no choice. We sprinted across the lawn, our breath coming in ragged gasps. But even as we ran, I knew it was watching us. And then, the lights in the Koki's house flicked on. A figure appeared at the window, staring out at us with wide, panicked eyes. They could feel it too. That terrified me more than anything else. We didn't stop running until we reached my mother's property. The old iron gate loomed ahead, and with adrenaline surging through my veins, I climbed over it in record time, pulling Dinishka up behind me. The moment our feet hit the ground, we ran. The familiar sight of my childhood home came into view, and from the porch, I heard a familiar sound, Benji, my dog, barking wildly. Relief flooded my chest. If Benji was barking, that meant we were. The ground trembled. Behind us, something landed with a sickening thud. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. If I looked, I knew I would see something my mind wasn't meant to comprehend. Zeus, my mother's massive horse, let out a guttural, terrified scream from his stable, his hooves slamming against the ground in sheer panic. And then Benji's barking stopped. That was enough for me. I grabbed Dinishka's hand again, dragging her toward the porch. We flung ourselves up the steps, through the door, and into the safety of the house. The second the door slammed shut behind us, I felt it lift. The air, the weight, the unspeakable pressure, it was gone. But we weren't safe. Not yet. In the living room, my cats had gathered, their eyes wide and alert, ears flattened against their heads. They knew. A split second later, a furious battle erupted among them. Claws slashed, fur flew, and guttural snarls filled the room. It wasn't a normal fight. They weren't fighting each other. They were fighting something we couldn't see. Dinishka and I backed into the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of whiskey off the counter. We drank straight from the bottle, neither of us speaking. We didn't need to. The night wasn't over yet, and we weren't alone. So we sat, wide-eyed and waiting, as the cats continued their battle with the unseen, praying that morning would come before whatever was outside decided to come inside. I never went back to that neighborhood again, though I try to convince myself that it was nothing more than a series of strange, inexplicable events. The lingering fear remains. The whispers, the laughter, the unseen presence that sent waves of terror through us that night, it was all too real. What really happened to us that night? I don't have an answer. But one thing I know for certain. There are things in this world that cannot be explained by logic or science. There are entities that exist in the shadows, watching, waiting, and once you encounter them, they never forget you. I've learned an important lesson. Sometimes, it's best not to seek the truth. I have many ghost stories, and I will share them one by one. But this is definitely the most haunting one. Looking back on my life, I realize that there are moments when people are most vulnerable to invisible forces, when we are weak, when we are alone, and when our minds wander into darkness. I believe that these entities, these beings that do not belong to our world, always linger nearby, waiting for the right moment to appear. And on one night in April 2003, I came face to face with one of them. I have always been quite sensitive to the unseen. I don't always see or feel things. But in certain moments, I just know that another presence is nearby. One of the first strange signs came from my cats. I have several cats, and they have always had a peculiar way of signaling to me when something was wrong. People with spiritual abilities often keep cats. I've heard this many times. Cats have an uncanny intuition. They sense things that humans cannot see. And they always know when something unnatural is lurking around. Lately, my cats had been acting strangely. They no longer curled up beside me at night as they used to. Instead, they became tense, their eyes constantly scanning the room, sometimes staring intently at a dark corner with their fur bristling. I didn't think much of it, until that fateful night. One night, I was sleeping when I suddenly woke up. The first thing I realized was that I couldn't breathe. At first, I thought one of my cats had laid on my face. That was something they often did. But as I fully woke up, I realized that I couldn't move. And, more terrifyingly, my pillow was being pressed tightly against my face as if an invisible hand was holding it down. Panic surged through me. I tried to breathe, but no air could pass through the thick fabric covering my nose and mouth. The suffocating feeling became more intense, as if some unseen force was deliberately pinning me down into the bed. I wanted to move, but my entire body seemed to be frozen. Only my mind remained active, filled with sheer terror and utter helplessness. And then, I saw it. Standing right next to my bed was a tall, thin figure, a death ghost, but completely white. It didn't look like the Grim Reaper from paintings or movies. There was no scythe, no hollow eye sockets, just a hazy form, like a skeleton draped in a long hooded robe that concealed everything except its hands. And worse, where its face should have been, there was only a misty white void, like a dense fog impossible to see through. It stood there, motionless, but I could feel it watching me. And before I could react, it lunged forward, grabbing the blanket on my bed, pulling it over my face, and pressing down. It was trying to kill me again. Darkness constricted around me, as if the entire room was being swallowed into an endless abyss with no light. No escape. I felt a horror unlike anything I had ever experienced, the feeling of being on the verge of death. In that moment, a thought flashed through my mind. I have to do something immediately. I was desperate. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't even scream, but in my mind, I knew that I couldn't die like this. I tried to shake my head even just a little, to struggle against the force pressing down on me, but it was useless. The paralysis held me in place, pinning me down like a lifeless puppet. The suffocating sensation grew worse, as if my lungs were about to explode from the lack of oxygen. And then, in a fleeting moment, I remembered something I had studied before: energy fields. I had read about how mental energy could be used to create a protective shield around the body. In this dire situation, it was my only chance. With every last ounce of strength I had, I visualized a radiant aura surrounding me, a protective barrier forming between me and this entity. With one final push of my willpower, I projected that energy outward as hard as I could. Immediately, I felt a counterforce pushing back. The blanket was yanked off my face as if someone had forcefully torn it away. Air rushed into my lungs, and I gasped for breath, my entire body trembling. When I opened my eyes, I saw it, the white figure, being thrown backward. It was no longer standing by my bed but instead floating away towards the corner of the room, shrinking as if being sucked into an invisible vortex. And then, it vanished. I lay there, heart pounding wildly, my body drenched in sweat. I could move again. I jumped out of bed, turned on every light in the house, and began sobbing uncontrollably. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I was so traumatized that I couldn't stop screaming for 2 days. I couldn't go to work, couldn't eat properly. I felt like I had just escaped death's grasp. It took me a whole week to even step foot into my bedroom again. And it took nearly a month before I could sleep without leaving every single light in my house turned on. People who heard my story always asked, "Why do you still live there? Why not move somewhere else?" I would just give them a weary smile and reply, "If something truly evil wants to find you, it will find you anywhere. Moving won't change that." I lived with that fear for a long time. But what terrified me the most wasn't the event itself, it was the unanswered question. Why did it come for me? To this day, I still don't know the answer. Hello everyone. Today I want to share with you a truly bizarre story that I personally experienced in my own apartment. Have you ever felt like something was off in your home? That unsettling feeling that you're not actually alone, even though no one else is there? At first, I thought it was just my imagination, or maybe exhaustion playing tricks on me. But as time went on, the strange occurrences became too frequent and too real to ignore. I've been living in this apartment for a while now. Everything seemed normal at first. But then I started noticing things I couldn't explain. These paranormal events happened not only at night but also in broad daylight, making it impossible for me to dismiss them as mere illusions. Here are the most terrifying experiences I've had in this place. One night, I was fast asleep when I suddenly felt something unusual. I opened my eyes and froze in shock. Right next to my bed stood a full-sized horse. A massive, solid creature that had no business being inside my small apartment. What's worse, sitting atop the horse was a cowboy, dressed in classic Old West attire. My heart pounded in my chest. How was this possible? I screamed. What the hell? The cowboy didn't say a word. He simply tipped his hat, gently nudged his boots against the horse's sides, and then, they both walked straight through my wall. That's when it hit me. I live on the second floor, and that wall leads directly outside. People later asked me, wait, wouldn't the horse have fallen? But come on, it was a ghost. If it could walk through walls, you really think gravity mattered? I lay in bed, completely stunned. Was I dreaming? But the lingering sense of terror told me otherwise. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Not long after the cowboy incident, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a man standing at the foot of my bed. He was wearing a dark blue plaid shirt and khaki pants. Looked to be in his 50s. Slightly overweight. The weird part? He didn't seem threatening. He was just there, watching. I blinked, and in that split second, he was gone. I lay there, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. What had I just seen? A lingering spirit? Another ghostly visitor? I started wondering, was my apartment some kind of supernatural hotspot? Another night, I was lying in bed when I noticed a small lump moving under my blanket. It was slow, deliberate, creeping toward me from the edge of the bed. I immediately assumed one of my cats had crawled under the covers. So I reached out, gently stroking the lump while saying, "Oh, such a cute kitty." The moment my hand made contact, it vanished. Nothing was there. A chill ran down my spine. That lump had been the exact size and shape of a cat. If it wasn't one of my pets, then what the hell was it? My bedroom has a massive window that takes up half the wall, allowing plenty of ambient city light to seep in at night. Not to mention my neighbor's ridiculously bright security light, which is always on. But one particular night, I turned off my bedroom light and was instantly swallowed by absolute darkness. Pitch black, a void so dense it felt suffocating, like I had been thrown into the depths of a cave where no light could reach. Panicking, I flipped my light back on and checked outside. Every streetlight was still shining bright. I turned the light off again. And once more, the suffocating darkness consumed the room. It was as if I had been transported to another dimension. I didn't dare turn the lights off again that night. One night, I woke up just in time to see a shaggy, fur-covered creature sprinting straight toward me. A club raised high as if it was about to strike. I screamed in terror. And just like that, it was thrown backward, shrinking smaller and smaller before vanishing entirely. What was that thing? A spirit? A monster? Something I wasn't meant to see? This one happened in broad daylight. I was watching TV when my cats suddenly ran to the center of the living room, standing on their hind legs, reaching up as if trying to catch something. That's when I noticed it, a swirling, glowing cloud hovering near the ceiling. I sat there, frozen, watching it spiral for a few minutes before it disappeared without a trace. My cats, completely unfazed, just went back to their usual routine, napping and destroying my furniture. These bizarre occurrences, were they mere coincidences? Or was something truly haunting my apartment? I have no idea who these spirits are or why they keep appearing here. Are they tied to this place? Did the previous tenants experience the same things? At first, I tried convincing myself it was all in my head. But after so many experiences, I can't deny it anymore. There's something beyond human logic happening here. Strangely enough, over time, I've learned to accept it. I no longer try to run from it or banish these entities. Maybe they are just part of this apartment. Maybe they're part of a much larger world we have yet to understand. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever experienced anything paranormal, feel free to share it in the comments. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you won't miss out on more spooky stories. Hello everyone. Today, I want to share with you a truly bizarre and chilling story that I experienced back in 1993. This is not just a tale of eerie supernatural events, but also a story of fate, past life connections, and an unseen force that quietly protected me. Do you believe in reincarnation? Do you think grudges from past lives can persist and affect the present? More importantly, if a malicious spirit wants to harm you, is there a force out there willing to protect you? This is exactly what I encountered. The story begins when I met a girl with extraordinary psychic abilities, someone who opened my eyes to a world beyond logic, filled with both wonder and danger. From ominous Ouija board sessions, a tragic curse spanning lifetimes, to the unexpected appearance of a mysterious guardian, This became one of the most unforgettable and terrifying experiences of my life. Let's dive into the story. In 1993, I was living in Santa Barbara when I suddenly found myself unemployed. For months, I searched for a job but had no luck. Out of desperation, I turned to temporary employment agencies, hoping for an opportunity. However, 6 out of 7 agencies immediately rejected me without even looking at my resume. They claimed I was overqualified due to my engineering degree. But when I reached the 7th agency, something strange happened. Not only did they accept my application, but they also found me a job immediately. Later, I discovered that this agency was run by 2 women with strong psychic abilities. And many of their employees also possessed spiritual gifts. At this new workplace, I quickly befriended a woman with an incredibly strong sixth sense. She could predict with uncanny accuracy what I had for breakfast or what letters would be in my mailbox when I got home. It was truly unsettling. She was deeply interested in the supernatural, particularly the Ouija board. At the time, I was also fascinated by it, though I would later learn why one should never play with such things. We often met up to use her special Ouija board, a beautifully crafted, circular wooden board adorned with intricate designs. The first time I used the board with her, I felt a strange sensation, like an invisible energy surrounding us. The planchette moved smoothly, as if guided by an unseen force. It was fascinating yet terrifying at the same time. That night, I went home feeling oddly uneasy, as if I had opened a door that should have remained shut. One evening, she told me an eerie story about her past lives. She believed that in every one of her previous incarnations, she had been murdered by the same malevolent spirit, a vengeful entity envious of her love with her soulmate. Even more disturbing, she was always killed using the same jeweled dagger. In this life, she had identified both her soulmate and the spirit that had tormented her through time. Ironically, those 2 individuals were now married to each other. She even had a photograph of them. And to my horror, in the picture, the woman, the supposed vengeful spirit, was wearing a jeweled dagger on her belt as a decorative accessory. I didn't know what to think. The story sounded too outlandish. But considering her psychic abilities, I couldn't entirely dismiss it. Something about it unsettled me deeply. She confided in me that she had been having recurring nightmares, visions of her own death in different centuries, in different places, but always by the same dagger. She believed that the woman in the photograph was not just an ordinary person, but someone who carried the echoes of a past filled with hatred and vengeance. One night, we decided to use the Ouija board to communicate with her guardian angel. But midway through the session, a dark force suddenly took over the board. It began cursing and threatening us. Terrified, we immediately ended the session and decided to call it a night. By then, it was already 2 a.m. As I was about to leave, I reassured her that I would try to help her escape her tragic fate through spiritual means. She thanked me. I gathered my things, and I stepped out of her apartment. But after taking just 10 steps outside, a blood-curdling scream erupted right beside my ear. It was as if someone had dashed past me and screamed directly into my ear, the sound flaring up before fading into silence in a split second. I spun around in shock, but there was no one there. My heart pounded. I had a terrible suspicion about what I had just heard. To confirm, I ran back inside and reopened the Ouija board, calling upon her guardian angel to explain what had just happened. The board spelled out a chilling message. "Don't help her, you fool." I was terrified. Had the malevolent spirit just warned me? From that night on, I felt an overwhelming sense of paranoia. I constantly felt watched, as if unseen eyes were following my every move. I began hearing faint whispers in the dead of night, words I couldn't quite make out, but I knew they weren't just in my head. Shaken, I left her apartment, got into my car, and began driving home. A few minutes later, while speeding down the highway, the impossible happened. A man suddenly appeared in the passenger seat beside me. He was completely solid, not ghostly or translucent. He looked about 35 years old, with blonde hair, wearing a red plaid shirt and blue jeans. He turned to face me, gave a small smile, and waved, before vanishing into thin air. I was stunned, but strangely, I didn't feel afraid, only a profound sense of calm. When I arrived at my apartment and parked my car, he appeared again. This time, he was sitting cross-legged on the hood of my car, smiling and waving as if to reassure me. And the next morning, while I was taking a shower, two eyes appeared in the bathroom wall, scanning the room before disappearing. In the end, nothing bad happened to me, and I never saw the man in the red plaid shirt again. But I am convinced that he was there to protect me from something sinister. Many people have asked me, weren't you scared, having someone suddenly appear beside you while driving at 70 miles per hour? Strangely, no. Every time he appeared, I felt completely safe and at peace. It was truly an unforgettable experience. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had similar paranormal encounters, feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you won't miss out on more chilling tales. Hello everyone. We continue with story number 7. One of the most chilling and mysterious tales about a notorious location in Cincinnati, Buffalo Ridge. This is a steep, winding road surrounded by eerie legends and paranormal occurrences that have puzzled locals for decades. At first glance, Buffalo Ridge seems like an ordinary place. It's home to Mitchell Memorial Forest, a park featuring nature trails, fishing lakes, and playgrounds for children. But beneath this serene appearance lurks a dark past, filled with ghostly encounters and unexplained phenomena. According to local legends, Buffalo Ridge was once home to a corrupt crematorium, a place where bodies were improperly disposed of. Their remains scattered throughout the dense forest. The spirits of those who were never given a proper burial are said to haunt the area, forever searching for their lost bodies. Some of the most terrifying tales associated with Buffalo Ridge include mysterious white vans that appear out of nowhere and chase visitors at night, ghost cars that vanish into thin air, a demonic black dog with glowing blue eyes lurking along the roadside, lost souls wandering the road, searching for their missing body parts, a mysterious man who appears in the darkness and disappears without a trace. Today, I'm going to share with you my own experience at Buffalo Ridge. Along with two friends, a night that left us shaken and questioning everything we thought we knew about the supernatural. Before we get into my personal encounter, let's take a look at some of the local legends surrounding this eerie road. When I was in high school, I often heard terrifying stories about Buffalo Ridge, and the tales never failed to send shivers down my spine. The white vans. Visitors have reported being chased by unmarked white vans late at night, vanishing without a trace when pursued. Phantom vehicles. People claim to have seen cars appearing out of nowhere, only to disappear moments later. The demon dog. A huge, Shadowy dog with glowing blue eyes is said to stalk travelers, growling menacingly before vanishing into the darkness. Restless spirits. Ghostly figures have been spotted wandering the roadside, desperately searching for their missing limbs or body parts. The cursed crematorium. The most notorious legend tells of a crematorium that disposed of bodies illegally, scattering their remains in the surrounding woods. It is said that the souls of the dead still linger, seeking justice. One of my high school teachers once told a chilling story about Buffalo Ridge. He and a friend had driven down the road one night and stopped in front of an abandoned barn. Out of curiosity, they opened the door and saw chickens hanging upside down from the rafters, blood dripping onto the ground below. Panicked, they rushed back to their car, only to be chased out of the area by a monstrous truck, which seemingly emerged from nowhere. Although the story was terrifying, I couldn't help but wonder, was there any truth to these legends? 2 weeks ago, I decided to explore Buffalo Ridge with my two friends, Jonathan and Kay. We arrived at 9 p.m., just as the last traces of daylight faded, leaving us in near total darkness. We parked a short distance from the main trailhead and walked toward the "No Dumping" sign that marked the beginning of the infamous path. The sign ominously read, "No dumping. Violators will be prosecuted." It seemed like an ordinary warning against littering, but under the circumstances, it felt far more sinister. As someone fascinated by local history, I eagerly shared everything I knew about the legends of Buffalo Ridge while Kay and Jonathan followed behind, each holding a flashlight. I, of course, didn't need one, because I wanted to maintain my tough guy image. Okay, truthfully, I was already feeling uneasy, but I didn't want to admit it. We followed the trail deep into the forest and soon arrived at the ruins of Cincinnati's first observatory, a long-forgotten structure hidden in the dense woods. Crumbling bricks, rusted metal beams, and scattered debris were all that remained of what was once a site of scientific discovery. We spent about 30 minutes exploring the ruins before settling down on a large rock, chatting about random things. Everything felt normal, until Kay suddenly spoke up. "The air just changed. Something feels different." Instantly, I felt a shift in the atmosphere. The air grew heavier, almost suffocating, as if we were being watched. Excited at the prospect of a ghostly encounter, I borrowed Jonathan's flashlight and climbed down into the observatory ruins, scanning the area for anything unusual. Kay, growing increasingly uneasy, urged us to leave immediately. I wanted to stay, but Jonathan, seeing how frightened she was, insisted we head back. As I climbed back up, I casually swung the flashlight toward Kay and Jonathan, only to see a dark figure standing near them. Thinking it was a harmless prank, I jokingly called out, "Hey, make sure to tell that guy we're not here to sacrifice any babies." Chuckling to myself, I finished my climb and turned back toward my friends, but the figure was gone. Kay was trembling, and Jonathan looked as if he had seen a ghost. I frowned and asked, "Where did that guy go?" Jonathan stammered, "I swear." A man walked out of the shadows, came straight toward us, and then vanished into thin air. At that moment, panic set in. We bolted toward the car, adrenaline coursing through our veins. Kay was terrified, Jonathan was exhilarated, and me? I was furious. Why? Because I had just missed the most supernatural moment of my life by looking away for a second. In the end, we left Buffalo Ridge with more questions than answers. Who was that shadowy figure? Was it the spirit of a restless soul, Or had we unknowingly stumbled upon something even darker? Regardless of what we saw, or didn't see, I am convinced that Buffalo Ridge holds secrets yet to be uncovered. Perhaps it's just folklore, or perhaps it's something real. One thing is certain. That night remains one of the most unnerving experiences of my life. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had a paranormal experience, share it in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with more chilling stories. Do you believe that loved ones, even after passing away, can find a way to say goodbye? Do you believe that dreams are more than just the random creations of our subconscious, but instead a bridge between two worlds? In today's story, I will share with you a deeply personal experience, a farewell dream from my beloved aunt, which happened at the exact moment of her passing. What made this dream so eerie was how she appeared so full of life. A stark contrast to how frail she had been before she died. Even stranger, she promised she would return. Was this merely my subconscious attempting to find closure? Or was it something beyond the realm of logic? If you've ever had a similar experience, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your own stories in the comments. I'd be fascinated to know if others have had similar dreams. Now, let's begin. 5 years ago, my aunt moved in with my family because she was seriously ill. Her children lived in another state, so to ensure she had proper care, she decided to stay with us. She wasn't just any relative, I was incredibly close to her. Perhaps even more than I was with my own mother. As a child, I spent hours listening to her stories, receiving her wise advice, and feeling comforted by her presence. When I heard she would be staying with us, I was genuinely happy. I wanted to make the most of our time together. She stayed with us for 5 months. Despite her worsening condition, she never complained. She would sit with me and chat, sometimes even helping my mother cook. But even though she put on a brave face, I could see her health deteriorating day by day. Then, one day, everything changed. After 5 months, my aunt decided to move to the West Coast to be closer to her children. Though I was heartbroken, I knew it was the best choice for her. She needed their care, and I wanted her to be surrounded by family. 2 months later, I received a phone call that made my heart drop. She's in the hospital. The doctors don't think she'll make it. Her daughter's voice trembled over the phone. I froze. I knew she had been sick, but I had clung to the hope that she would somehow recover. The thought of losing her was unbearable. I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude that I had those last few months with her. Yet at the same time, an indescribable sadness washed over me. Little did I know, something even stranger was about to happen. 1 week later, on a seemingly ordinary night, I lay on the sofa, drifting between sleep and wakefulness. Then, I had a dream. In the dream, my aunt was standing in my driveway, smiling and waving at me. But something was off. She looked perfectly healthy. Her body, once frail and weakened by illness, was now strong and full of life. She was running and jumping, something she had not been able to do in years. She waved at me and said, "Goodbye, but I'll be back." Her voice was firm, certain, as if this wasn't just a farewell but a promise. Then, she got into an SUV and drove away. I stood there, watching her disappear into the distance, feeling a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Just as her car vanished from sight, I woke up. At that exact moment, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice trembled. "Your aunt just passed away." I already knew, because she had just come to say goodbye. What haunts me most about this dream isn't just the eerie timing. It's the details. She looked completely healthy. In reality, she had been frail and weak from her illness, unable to stand for long periods. She was running and full of energy. In her final months, she could barely walk without assistance. She got into a car and drove away. But she never had a car. She was far too weak to drive for years. It was as if she wanted to show me that she was free from the pain that had tormented her for so long. But one thing still lingers in my mind. She said, "I'll be back." What did she mean by that? Would she visit me again? Would I feel her presence in some way? I have never seen a ghost. And truthfully, I don't know if I'd want to. I'm the type of person who would probably lose sleep for weeks if I ever encountered something supernatural. But part of me still hopes, maybe, just maybe, she's still watching over me. Whether it was pure coincidence or a true spiritual connection, this experience convinced me of one thing. Love never truly dies, even when someone we cherish is no longer physically here. Their presence remains in ways we may not fully understand. I may never know if my aunt's dream visit was real, but I like to believe she came to say goodbye, to let me know she was okay, that she was finally at peace. And as for her promise to return, I suppose only time will tell. What do you think? Have you ever had a dream like this? Do you believe in farewell dreams? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your own experiences in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more eerie and thought-provoking stories like this one. Welcome back, everyone, to another chilling tale. Today, I want to share with you a personal experience that has haunted me for years. A story about eerie occurrences in both my old house in Norfolk, Virginia, and my current apartment in Huntington, West Virginia. Have you ever heard invisible footsteps, seen doors shaking on their own, or felt an unseen presence watching you? If not, consider yourself lucky, but if you have, then you'll know that sometimes things happen that defy all logical explanations. What I'm about to tell you is real, whether you believe in ghosts or not. These events left an undeniable mark on my life. Let's dive into the story. Back in the early 1970s, while serving in the Navy, I rented an old two-story house in Norfolk, Virginia. The house was charming but aged, with creaky wooden floors and a staircase that led up to the second floor, where the master bedroom, a smaller bedroom, and a bathroom were located. One afternoon, while folding my laundry in the master bedroom, I heard the front door open and close. Since I had several roommates, I didn't think much of it. I simply called out, "I'm upstairs." Silence. Then, I heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. At first, I thought it was one of my roommates coming home. But the sound was too slow, too deliberate, as if someone were struggling to climb the stairs. The steps reached the midway landing and paused. A deep sense of unease crept over me. My heart pounded as I waited. Then, the footsteps resumed, ascending the final few steps toward my room. But when I looked down the hallway, there was no one there. The footsteps had been loud and clear, yet the hallway was completely empty. I stood frozen, feeling an icy chill spread through my body. Then, without thinking, I ran out of my room and down the stairs, not daring to look back. Sometime later, I came home one evening to find all the lights in the house turned on. One of my roommates was sitting in the living room, looking pale. gripping a metal poker from the fireplace as if his life depended on it. I asked him what happened. He told me that while watching TV, the back door handle started turning on its own. Thinking it was one of us returning home, he called out, "Who's there?" No response. Then, the door suddenly shook violently, as if someone was trying to break in. He ran to the door and flung it open, only to find no one there. The screen door was still locked, with no way for anyone to reach inside and turn the handle. Yet, something had just tried to get in. When I told him about my experience with the invisible footsteps, he turned pale. He admitted that he, too, had heard strange phantom footsteps when no one else was home. But he had never told anyone for fear of sounding crazy. Soon, other roommates started sharing similar stories. That house is gone now, demolished to make way for a highway and overpass. But I always wonder, what happened to the spirits that haunted it? In 1979, I moved into an apartment in Huntington, West Virginia. This wasn't just any apartment. It was part of an old 3-story brick building built in 1906. Over the years, several residents in my building claimed to have seen a woman in a long black dress and white blouse silently walking into a certain apartment, only to vanish without a trace. It is said that the building's original landlady lived there from 1911 to 1951. Some believe her spirit still lingers, watching over her former property. One evening in the early 1980s, I was playing cards with a neighbor in his apartment. There was no TV, no radio, no other noise, just the two of us. Suddenly, we heard loud crashing noises from the apartment next door, like someone rifling through cabinets and throwing things around. My neighbor jumped up, grabbed his keys, and ran next door, but when he unlocked and opened the door, everything was perfectly still. Nothing was out of place. Yet, we had both heard the sounds so clearly. I knew, from that moment on, that I was not alone in this building. On the night of August 2nd, I was watching TV with my cat, Muffy. It was a humid, stiflingly hot night. Suddenly, Muffy's ears perked up. Her fur bristled as she let out a low growl, staring intently at the closed bathroom door. Her tail flicked back and forth, her eyes wide with terror. I laughed nervously. "Come on, Muffy. There's nothing there." But deep down, I wasn't so sure. To prove it, I walked to the bathroom door, grabbed the doorknob, and pulled it open. A sudden blast of freezing air hit me. The temperature in the bathroom plunged at least 20 degrees, an impossible contrast to the summer heat in the rest of the apartment. I stood there, stunned, as the cold air surrounded me. Muffy stopped growling and stared at me as if to say, "Now do you believe me?" Every year, on August 2nd, I always felt the same eerie presence. But in the past few years, it has stopped. Where did it go? After all these years, I still wonder. Were these spirits trapped? Were they trying to communicate? Or were they simply echoes of the past, imprinted on the walls of these old buildings? I may never know. But one thing is certain, I was never truly alone. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had a ghostly encounter, share it in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more spine-chilling stories. Hello everyone. Welcome back to another chilling story. If you've ever wondered whether old houses can harbor spirits from the past, then today's story might make you think twice. In 1987, I lived with 4 roommates in an old house in Atlanta. We were young, full of energy, and excited about living independently. The house we rented was over 100 years old, built right after the American Civil War, when Atlanta had been heavily destroyed by Union forces. At first, we saw it as nothing more than a charming, vintage home located in Inman Park. But within just a week of moving in, we began to feel an unseen presence, something lurking in the shadows, watching us, moving silently through the rooms. And then, the eerie incidents began. One night, as we were all deep asleep, a blood-curdling scream shattered the silence. It came from Hannah's room. We jumped out of bed, rushing into her room. Hannah was sitting upright on her bed, panting heavily, her eyes wide with terror. I just woke up and saw a tall, shadowy man standing right next to my bed. He was staring at me. She described it as a faceless, dark figure, tall and ominous. The moment she screamed, the entity turned and silently walked out of the room. We immediately searched the entire house, but there was no one else besides us. Every door and window was locked from the inside. From that night on, Hannah refused to stay in the house alone. The more we tried to rationalize the experience, the more we found ourselves trapped in the cycle of fear. It wasn't just her. Soon, others would start seeing glimpses of movement in the corners of their eyes or hear faint whispers just beyond their reach. 2 weeks later, at around 2 a.m., we were all suddenly startled awake by a loud crash coming from the hallway. Running to check, we were stunned to find that the full-length mirror in the bathroom had shattered into hundreds of pieces. Strangely, the frame was still perfectly intact, still securely fastened to the door, only the glass was broken. No one could explain how it had happened. No earthquake, no strong wind, and no one had touched it. A mirror doesn't just break for no reason. From that moment on, everyone started feeling uneasy. We could no longer ignore the chilling signs. The broken mirror was only the beginning. More bizarre incidents followed. Objects mysteriously disappearing. Keys, wallets, and phones frequently vanished, only to reappear in strange places where no one had put them. Unexplained noises. At night, we heard knocking sounds, footsteps on the second floor, and even faint whispers. Lights turning on and off. Occasionally, lights would switch on by themselves, even when the switches were untouched. Sinister laughter. Once, while I was home alone, I distinctly heard soft, eerie laughter coming from the basement. When I went down to check, there was no one there. Strange figures in reflections. More than once, someone would catch a glimpse of a dark shape standing in the reflection of a window or mirror, only for it to disappear the moment they turned around. At this point, none of us wanted to be in the house alone. About 2 months later, we hosted a small house party. One of our guests, a girl who had never been to our house before, decided to explore the basement alone. Minutes later, she came racing up the stairs, pale-faced, shaking with fear. I just saw a man standing in the corner of the basement. She claimed that when she called out to him, he stood still, then vanished into thin air right before her eyes. We rushed to the basement, but found no one. The strangest part, this girl knew nothing about the hauntings in our house. So how did she see the same dark figure Hannah had seen? We later discovered that the basement had once been used as a temporary makeshift morgue during a deadly flu outbreak in the early 1900s. The thought that restless spirits could still be lingering there sent chills down our spines. After 6 months, the ghostly activity gradually ceased. We started convincing ourselves that maybe it was all just our imagination. But one final event changed my beliefs forever. One evening, my wife and I went out for dinner and struck up a conversation with a couple sitting nearby. When they asked where we lived, I casually mentioned our house in Inman Park. They exchanged a startled glance. "We used to live there. What's your address?" When I told them, the woman gasped and immediately asked, "Have you seen the ghost yet?" I was frozen in shock. How could they possibly know? They went on to describe the exact same eerie occurrences we had experienced. At that moment, I knew we hadn't imagined anything. The house was truly haunted. They even claimed that an older tenant had once attempted a séance in the house, which might have stirred up something that had previously been dormant. The realization that we had possibly been sharing our home with lingering spirits was unsettling. After everything I experienced, I no longer doubt the existence of spirits. Some may dismiss ghost stories as superstition, but I believe that there are things in this world that science simply cannot explain. Even now, I occasionally think back to that house and wonder, are the spirits still there? Or have they finally found peace? What about you? Have you ever lived in a haunted house? Have you witnessed something unexplainable? Share your experiences below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more terrifying ghost stories.